the East Coast in general has always like had a harder time getting that recognition nationally as like a place for hip hop. Purposefully, like part of what I'm trying to do is to kind of establish the reality that good hip hop can exist anywhere, you know.
Hello and welcome to the Release Day Series podcast. I'm your host, Alex Heward, and joining me today from the East Coast of Canada and New Brunswick is Matthew Elliot, better known in the hip hop community as Stephen Hero. And we're going to talk about his new EP, Gold Collection, that he released on May 13th, 2022. The EP forms a loose meditation on the self-destructiveness of wage aspirations, the way the poor hold up the rich in the hopes that they might one day join them, therefore maintaining the status quo and enforcing the division. Heavy stuff, and I'm looking forward to getting into this with him. Now, having a hip-hop artist hasn't been a common occurrence on the podcast, not for any real reason. It's just nothing has stood out to me like what Stephen Hero has. And I'm excited to dive into the production of the tracks, dig around inside the mind of Stephen Hero for a better understanding of what this project is all about. So broadcasting from the traditional territory of the First Peoples of the Williams Treaties First Nations, the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, Wendat, Inuit, and Métis peoples, this is my conversation with Stephen Hero. Stephen, welcome to the show, man. I love this EP. This to me is real hip hop. This is what I love to listen to when I put on hip hop.
Thank you, man.
It's like old school. It's great samples and beats. Can you talk to me about the artists and albums that you were listening to growing up that made you fall in love with hip hop?
Yeah, definitely, man. I got into hip hop in like the 4th grade, so that's like 97. Through a couple main things. There was one Puff Daddy and the Family album, No Way Out, which is like a classic, great album that has All About the Benjamins on it, and some other bangers. I got that when I was in the 4th grade, just kind of by accident, because my sister got it for Christmas, and I got a Boyz II Men CD, and she wanted to trade. She wanted the Boyz II Men CD. I didn't know what either thing was. So I was like, yeah, whatever. But yeah, I remember just listening to that tape in my headphones just constantly over and over and over again. And it had, like, that album has such a cinematic quality. There's so much going on it that's that I had never heard in music before at that age, But this Puff Daddy album, it had so much going on it. Like, there's all these skits and like concepts, kind of heavy concepts on the album, because it was... a lot of the album was about the death of the Notorious B.I.G., which had been a year prior. So it was kind of Puff Daddy unpacking that, and also like introducing you to like the next stage of like what they were going to do as a label. So it was like lots of Mace on there and the Locks and stuff. So it was that. And then the first CD I ever bought with my own money was the Space Jam soundtrack. And that
Nice.
Is super good as well. Like that shit is super good. It has a song on it called the Monstars Anthem. And it's like Be Real from Cypress Hill, and Cool J's on it, Method Man. I'm forgetting some people, but it's like a posse cut, and it's really good. And that was like the sort of basis for like me kind of hearing this music and getting excited about it. And then when I was in grade 6, that was when the like My Name Is video came out. Like the first Eminem album, and of course like the first line in My Name Is Hi Kids. So it's like, it's very much like it kind of came right out of the TV at me. And then when I got that album, I got really into it, because it was like he was talking about being bullied and like things like that, and I found that really relatable. Being like poor and white and getting bullied was like just sounded like my life. So that's kind of how I got like really, really deep into it. And then, as I was getting older, I started getting into Tupac and Biggie through the Puff Daddy album as well. And then just everybody, I started getting into Jay-Z. I remember when the Blueprint came out, and my friend Angus, I didn't have any money, but my friend Angus bought a copy, and I remember opening it and kind of obsessing over the aesthetic of it. It just looked cool. And I like CDs, and I like the that physical aspect, you know, of like opening something up. And I'm like one of those people that like reads the booklets and stuff, or at least back when you still were buying physical music, like I was doing that a lot. So that kind of like formed the basis. And you can hear it on this EP too. There's a lot of like it has its weirdness, but there's definitely a like a pretty strict connection to that like late 90s, early 2000s stuff. Like the drums especially, I would say, because they're kind of like fat kick drums, but like really clear, crisp drums that are like very defined, and that's kind of like forms the basis for me that kind of keeps it from being too weird or whatever. But I listen to I keep track of what's going on. I'm not one of those people that like doesn't pay attention or like thinks the hip hop's bad now or something. Like I'm definitely not one of those people. I'm listening every day. There's a bunch of shit that has come out this year that I love. So yeah.
Yeah. Were you a Dat Piff guy? Is that still around? Dat Piff? Is that the website?
It's still around. It's not its heyday. I mean, I don't know what they would say, but it's not. Yeah. It's definitely not the heyday. But I remember I was on Dat Piff a lot. I think I put a mixtape on there maybe in like 2012 or something. Hopefully it's not there still.
So what's the atmosphere like in the hip hop world where you are?
It's good right now. Like it's I think it's on the come up for sure. There's a energy I think that's a little bit new. There's always been people in New Brunswick, you know, doing hip hop and involved in the hip hop world. Same thing as Nova Scotia, you know what I mean? Like if you look into it, like you can find hip hop from the East Coast as far back as like the early 80s at least. So it's always been here, but it's been like typically underserved by the industry a little bit. And yeah, you just have like more crews and stuff, you know, like there's a whole like movement in Fredericton right now with these Renegade Studios guys that are like, they have a studio and there's a bunch of them and they're making a bunch of music and putting it out and doing shows and stuff, which is super cool. And then we still have like the OGs, you know, like the Presidents of Canada as a group here with like Sean One and Monarch from Fredericton. They've been around forever doing their thing, and they're like, you know, they're better than ever and making more shit and putting out records. So it's like, you know, and we have variety too, right? Because I feel like what like Sean and Monarch are doing is definitely different than what I'm doing, and what I'm doing is very different again from like what like the Renegades guys are doing. And then you have somebody like Wolf Castle, for example, who's like doing a thing that's different from everything I just named. So I feel like for being like a small place with the population that we have, there's quite a lot of variety. And I'm forgetting some people too, like there's a bunch of people. I think there's a good energy right now, and like being out at shows and stuff, people in the scene to me like seem excited and
that's cool.
And ready to go, right? So like I know I'm purposefully like part of what I'm trying to do is to kind of establish the reality that good hip hop can exist anywhere, you know. The East Coast in general has always like had a harder time getting that recognition nationally as like a place for hip hop. And I think that's starting to change for sure, you know. Like I think that new Ghetto Socks and DK record is like super incredible, and like
you're gonna have to send me links to some of these, man. I want to check all this stuff out because
I will, man, for sure.
New Brunswick, and I'm sure that the viewers, the listeners want to check it out as well, and I'd love to share more of that as because like it's not where I go first, you know. I mean, right. For hip hop, again, it's not that it's secondary to me, but I mean when I hear good hip hop and hip hop that stands out to me, that's when I want to check it out. And so being able to hear that this is what's coming out of New Brunswick, and that there are communities like this that are there, and they're artists and people that have been doing this for a long time, I feel like I'm doing a disservice to the country, the genre, not checking these guys out. So
I'll put you on, man. I'll put you on for sure.
I'd love it.
You up with some links.
Perfect, man. Well, just before we get into the EP, I want to just dive behind the name for a minute, because when I emailed you, I called you Steven thinking that your name was Steven, and it's not. I would find out in your reply it's Matthew Elliot. Talk to me about Steven Hero. It's the title, and I guess is it a character from a James Joyce book?
That's right. Yeah, it was the working title of Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, or The Artist as a Young Man. I came up with that name in 2007 or 8, I want to say. I was living on Elliot Row here in Saint John, just a couple of streets away. And it was a particularly difficult year, we'll say. Like I just, financially it was difficult, which like wasn't necessarily new, but it was like, I just ended up in a place like that was like not very safe. So I was like living in a place that was very scary to live in. But I was writing a shitload.
Yeah.
I was making a bunch of shit. And I was just reading a lot. And I was trying to read James Joyce at the time. I don't know how much I really was like taken in to my fucking drug-addled 19-year-old brain, but I was reading James Joyce. And I thought Stephen Hero sounded like, in a weird way, sounded like a rap name, which it does and it doesn't. Like it's a funny thing. Like it sounds like something.
Yeah.
You know, but
sounds good to me, man.
I liked it immediately. And then it did, like, it just kind of stuck. Like that was 2009. And yeah, I like the connection of like Portrait of the Artist as a young man. It kind of like a lot of the time in the songs, like there is an element of that. And I always think there's this James Joyce quote that I always think about that's like in the particular is contained the universal, something like that. I always fuck it up, but it's something like that. But it's just like it's just him talking about writing and the idea of like, if you're trying to write broadly for some reason, like you know, for mass appeal or something like that, you know, there's times where that can be successful, you know, if you do it right. But for the most part, like art that has any lasting power and that people actually care about tends to be a little bit more specific than that. And the reason for that is because, you know, once you get into the real particulars of some element of human experience, then you end up exposing something usually emotionally that's universal. And that, whenever I think about that quote, it always, in my mind, it always applies directly to hip hop because hip hop's the best thing ever, but also just because there's such a strong like regionality in hip hop, and not across the board 100% whatever, but regionalism is a huge part of hip hop, and especially in the era that I came up in, you know, when it was like, when I was a kid, the South was still trying to like prove that they were a legitimate force in hip hop, which is hilarious now because now they're obviously the dominant one. But, you know, in that era, it was still like, people still had this idea that like, if it wasn't West Coast or East Coast, it just didn't, like, it wasn't a thing at all, you know? And there's a huge, like, throughout the history, you can see like Outkast and UGK and people like being like sort of almost obstinate in the way that they're like, we are super regional, like this is who we are and where we're from, and we're putting on for that, and we're not gonna like try to act like we're from fucking New York. And that's like a huge important part of how you get all these different, like that's why the genre itself is like so varied and so rich with like culturally and content wise, and like because of that regionalism. And so the James Joyce quote connects to the regionalism to me, and the regionalism is really important to me in terms of like who I am as an artist. It doesn't seem likely to me that I'll ever get to the level that I'm trying to get at by trying to fit in or trying to sound like, you know, someone else. Like, I don't think that works. It never works long term, but it rarely works at all. And when it does, it's usually like a flash in the pan thing. So yeah, I'm trying to develop like a body of work and like a signature style that is all mine. And that's just what I learned that from all my heroes, you know, everybody that I listened to growing up, that's what they did, you know, like you were never going to hear UGK being like apologetic about being Southern, like, you know what I mean? Like that's the thing. So that's what I try to do is like the shit that I make could only come from where I come from. And that, I think that's interesting. So
yeah, I mean, even the theme behind this project, right? I mean, again, I mentioned it in the intro, but I'll read it again. The EP forms a loose meditation of the self-destructiveness of wage aspirations, the way the poor hold up the rich in the hopes that they might one day join them, therefore maintaining the status quo and enforcing the division. And you follow that up with a quote: "It's a problem that's made for some incredible art and a lot of inspiring stories, but it's worth deconstructing a little bit, so I decided to go there while trying my best not to suck the fun out of the room, and
Yeah.
you definitely do have fun on that. I mean, I think it's in Fly Guy. There's a moment where you laugh, and
Yeah.
it's great. So that regionalism you say in your sound as well, but how does that also lend to the content that you're singing about? Like what's happening around you that you're writing about?
Well, it's this the shit that I make is always like always have a very strong sort of anti-capitalism message. That's like the river that runs through my work in general. I feel quite strongly about that, and that has a lot to do with where I live and where I'm from. You know what I mean? Like New Brunswick is essentially owned by some oligarchs. Like, we like the Irving family essentially owns the province. Our premier right now is like a backward thinking, like dumb as a post, ex-Irving employee that hates women. So we're in a situation now where like we're kind of seeing the effects of late stage capitalism and how it's kind of destroying everything. But again, to go to like focus on the regionalism, like I'm not going to speak on a situation that I don't know about, so that to me is important in the music that I make. Like I'm not gonna like speak on behalf of somebody that I'm not, and whose experience I haven't experienced. So I can only speak from my perspective, and my perspective being someone that's from New Brunswick and that's lived in poverty most of my life, in a situation where we have this like family, for instance, that's like an insane, like wealthy to an insane degree, that makes no sense at all. You think about it all the time, and we have one of the biggest like oil refineries in the world, like right over there. I can see it from my front stoop. And so you think about it all the time. And the city in general, it's a very working class place, but it's always had like sort of rich people pulling the strings and stuff. And that affects us all in different ways too. It's like right now and over the years, like a lot of the things that Saint John has done poorly, because I love this city, I love Saint John very much, but a lot of the ways in which it's gotten so fucked up is just like small groups of rich people being like greedy and stupid, and then also like just ignoring the strength that the city has in the name of like a quick buck. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of good people in the city working super hard to improve it every day. Obviously, there's like people working in social programs. There's like the John Howard Society. There's like a bunch of food banks here. There's different community, like the Crescent Valley Resource Center on the Lower West Side, and like that are doing like there's a ton of people here. The Needle Drive, like things like that. There's a ton of people here doing the stuff that really, really badly needs to be done, but those people aren't getting the funding that they should be getting, and they're just not being placed. There's not an importance placed on it that, in my opinion, should be there. A lot of the resources over the years have been focused on like grabbing like tourism money. We have like a waterfront and like a lot of cruise ship. Pandemic notwithstanding, we have like a lot of cruise ship activity and stuff. So a lot of the stuff. A lot of the decisions that have been made over the years have been kind of focused in on that, and the pandemic has really kind of revealed how short-sighted that is. And it can be frustrating because the city, being from here, like the city has like real character. It has a feel to it. Like not every place has a feel to it. Saint John definitely does, and it has like a hardworking spirit and a bunch of young entrepreneurs and artists doing things. There's a lot of art galleries in Saint John. There's a lot of artists, and there's a lot of cool little shops. Like Uptown Saint John is a really cool place, but those like people have to like really struggle to kind of keep things like that going. And it's frustrating because a little bit of like care and thought towards that would actually benefit everybody, including tourism, right? Because why the fuck would you go to a place if there's nothing interesting there,
Right.
So if you focus all your energy on like creating a couple tourist traps, like obviously that's short-sighted. And I think now we're finally starting to get out of that era, but we also now like part of that is having to contend with condos and shit, like so now it's like gentrification. So we have this new issue of like, how are we going to handle that situation? Because St. John is, every neighborhood within the city is mixed income. That's how St. John has always been. And that's always been a strength of the city to me. So it's scary to see like how high rent prices are getting.
Yeah.
You know, our inflation in New Brunswick is insanely high, but the minimum wage is also like one of the lowest in the country. And like property tax is also very high. And then like, you know, so it's like it's this thing where no one's getting paid properly. Rents are skyrocketing, and like it's just like it's very scary because at the same time, like a lot of development is happening, and development can be good, but not every type of development is good. Like the people that are from here and live here and work here shouldn't be pushed out. So, you know, it's like I guess it's like any city, right? But that like I think about this shit all the time, and it makes its way into the rap music that I'm making. But I put that quote in there, but like not trying to suck the fun out of the room for that reason, because I'm not really. I still want the music to be enjoyable and like and fun, and to work in a live environment and things like that.
Yeah.
You know, that's why this album is like, it is pretty upbeat, and like there's choruses on every song and stuff. Like, you know, I want it to be fun, but I think you can talk about that shit a little bit. And this one, like, I think the last project, Eat the Rich, was a little bit more on the nose about these kind of topics, you know, and like, which I like. But this one, I think, kind of like talks about it and floats around it in a way that, like, once you listen to the album for a little while, it'll probably come out at you, but you could also just throw it on and not necessarily think about the crumbling of civilization.
Right.
Or whatever.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, you got me humming and singing along to 40-foot Lomo. That's for sure.
That's an old radio jingle from the 90s. Like, I've done it, like, I've pulled that out at shows before, just like at the end of the night, just started singing it, and the whole room
Erupts, eh?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Which is great. But so everybody here, I think, always assumed that it's just us, but it turns out that it was a radio jingle that got used in a bunch of different markets, in like small town markets in North America, and they would just, you know, re-record it with the name of that town. But none of that takes away, like, that honestly just kind of adds to it to me, like, just the idea that it's this fucking, you know, radio jingle to like try to like cheer people up about taking the bus. I just love that.
The instrumentals on this, like, they're great. I mean, like, I get a little, like, you get some classic hip hop feel. I also get, and obviously he's influenced, but some Macklemore feel as well. Where's the Lie gives me like a fun, like, cool Macklemore type of a beat. And but these samples that you have, and some of the music that you've got, you pulled from a cheap compilation tape from your dad's car.
Yeah. For this album, I made all the beats myself. So this is something I just made from scratch, which is the first time I've done that. So usually I'll work with producers, like for Eat the Rich, Bryden Crane made all the beats. But this one, over the winter, I really kind of hunkered down and taught myself how to make beats.
Awesome.
And then, so this is the first project, you know, that I've self-produced.
Great.
I have like a little cassette player in here in my studio at home here.
Oh,
there
yeah.
It is.
Wow.
So it's just like an old school kind of cassette thing.
Yeah.
And I just like cassettes. I like listening to them and stuff. And I have a lot of these old compilations, like Solid Gold Collection, and like,
cool.
You know what I mean? That's kind of the like energy I was kind of trying to channel for the beats. And like pulling stuff off cassette is fun because you get so much tape noise and hiss and stuff. And like, I think that's a big part of the sound of the album is just like cassette stuff. Even like there's a song on there where I use the buttons of that tape player as like a percussion element and just kind of weaved that into the beat.
It just sounds like there's like, you've taken, like, when you listen, when you hear the samples, but then you hear the beat that you bring in with it. It's just really, there's no disconnect, you know? It's like you've kind of taken that sample and then you've built something on top of it that blends really well with it.
Right. Yeah. And that's just like trying to channel, you know, people like Dilla or Madlib or whatever. Not that I would in any way compare myself to those people, but I love that thing of like taking a piece of music and just chopping it up and rearranging it, and just creating something new. And it's like, it's fun because there's certain musical things that happen when you do that you can't plan for, like just because you're taking so many notes stacked on top of each other and then rearranging them. So little accidents happen. Like there's definitely, I think in Where's the Lie in particular, there's something that happens in that beat, and I don't know what it is because I don't read music, and like I'm not a technical person, so I don't know what it is. But there's something in that beat where the way that sample's chopped up and rearranged in layers, it kind of creates like there's a new sort of voicing, almost you would call it, like a new chord voicing or something that makes it like, it almost sounds a little bit like reggae influence to me. I like discovery as a part of what you're doing, and so when making beats is kind of like that, where it's like you start throwing stuff at the wall and then you might end up with something really shitty that you have to throw out, but you might end up with something really cool. And sometimes you like Where's the Lie, I actually labored over quite a bit, and which is funny because the final product is like one of the simpler things on the album, you know, like something like Daisy Age is a lot of layers of sampling and like different types of drums and stuff, and a lot of like post-production in like what we did to the drums, and like there's that almost like a bridge in a section and stuff like that. So it's kind of like more complicated. That song actually, Daisy Age, I think is probably the most Cadence Weapon influenced thing in my catalog so far.
Yeah.
Love Cadence Weapon.
I was going to say like in even in listening to like Daisy Age, it also feels more of like a, I don't know, like almost would be something that would be like your favorite song. It seems like there's a lot that you put into that song that, you know, you would, you know, it could be like a, you know, a deep cut. It would be, you know? So that's what I got when I listened to it. I'm like, man, this is probably something that's like a favorite to him, or to like somebody that's been following you as a listener for a long time.
I definitely have some like friends and musician friends that pointed that song out.
Yeah.
But that one went through a lot of stages, you know. The first version of it, I think the second verse was the first verse, and that first verse was completely different. Yeah. And it was the second verse, and it didn't have a bridge, and the timing, the like time signature was different, and the chorus was different. And then I kept picking away at it because I just couldn't get it the way that I wanted. And then there was a day where I kind of stripped away the whole main sample that I was using and reconstructed it without that, and then like sort of peppered in the sample in a lighter way, and then it started to finally turn a corner. And then I started changing the lyrics a little bit and redid the vocals, and that's how it ended up. But Where's the Lie, like I was saying about Where's the Lie, that started out really different too, and I had a bunch of layers of vocals in that chorus and stuff. And then once I fixed the beat, I obsessed over that beat for a long time, and finally kind of got, it's a simple beat, but it's, you know, anytime you're doing something super simple, like shit's got to be right, it's gonna sound fun.
Right.
So I labored over it for quite a while, and then when I ended up doing the final version of it, I scrapped all the vocals I had, because I had like a main vocals for the verse, and then I had backup vocals, and then I had ad-libs, and then I had like 4 layers for the choruses as well, plus ad-libs. And I scrapped all of that, and then I just performed the song once through, and that's the final take.
Wow. So
there's no punch-ins, there's no overdubs or anything. That version that's on the album is just like press record, and I just rapped the song from start to finish, and that was it.
Amazing.
And I think that just worked better for the feel of the song. Yeah. You know, I was trying to make it perfect, but I think that song, like, it has kind of like a, you know, has kind of like a bop to it, and you just kind of got to feel it.
Yeah.
And I like doing that song live a lot. It feels nice. It has a good energy to it.
Could you just talk to me about Drowned Rat Records? Where that came from?
Yeah, that's just something that me and my friends have just started talking about. We want to treat it sort of like a collective, but I like coming from where I'm at, you know, I'm seeing some interesting stuff happen musically, and I'm a workaholic, so I always think like it would be good if there's more things for me to do. So one of the things we thought about was like having this sort of like tiny label, and maybe it's just like me and one other person or whatever, but you know, now that I'm making beats, I'm trying to make beats for other people, and then I have my records to put out, and then like, you know, I have some other artists I've been talking to about producing for, and yeah, so that's like something for the future, because one thing we've talked about is doing like where I'm producing, like I could do an album where it's like some of the songs are me and some of them are other rappers or singers or whatever on my production, and I could, like, from my home studio here, I can, you know, engineer and produce it and mix and master it. So it wouldn't be too hard to like put together a cool compilation of artists and just have like a Drowned Rat compilation. So that's something we've talked about doing down the road.
And that's going back to, right? I mean, a lot of compilation records from back in the day too is kind of the old hip hop thing to do.
Well, even
as well,
No Way Out, right? Like the first album I ever got into, like that Puff Daddy album, is like a compilation group album for the label for Bad Boy. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Drowned Rat, Half-Life Records out in the East Coast there, you know, just get that get that bumping up. Well, man, you've had great success, you know, obviously to this point as well, in my opinion, you know, for what you're doing, features and Exclaim and Complex, and you know, it's well deserved. Gold Collection EP is you know, it's a deep, heavy, but it's a great, also fun EP to get into, and I'm excited to check out more New Brunswick artists, man. So thank you, Stephen Hero, for joining me on the Release Day Series podcast.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was great.
You can discover more podcast episodes as well as our limited video series on our website, www.releasedayseries.com. And if you'd like to support the show, we've added that option to the website as well. Send us $1, $3, $5, whatever you'd like. Any support helps. But most importantly, we appreciate you listening and sharing the podcast.